Hey guys, what's happening? So we're back for part 4 of our coverage of Wolverine Revenge, which feels like a story that could have ended with issue 3, but I'm so glad it didn't, because everything we've seen has set up a whole new story to start here. And I got the full playlist in the description for anyone who needs to get caught up and find out what led to this world being in the state that it is, and what led to Wolverine being where he's at when this story kicks off. So with that said, if you're enjoying these videos, do be sure to drop a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and don't forget to hit that bell up top to get all notifications. Alright, so coming back, this picks up 20 years after the death match between Wolverine and Colossus, which like we saw at the time was Wolverine's last stop on his revenge tour, with him killing Deadpool, Omega Red, and Mastermind. So now there's really nothing left for him to do except try to go back to somewhat of a normal life, in a world that's still not so normal anymore, as a result of what began with Asteroid M falling out of orbit and detonating above Quebec. And as we pick up with Logan, we're told here, the old world was gone, and a new one had risen in its place. It was not some pale reflection of what had passed, a remembrance of what was. It couldn't be, because while people are resilient, societies are not. Almost everyone had moved on and forgotten what was. Almost everyone. And that applies here in so many ways. And not just in the case of remembering the past, but it's also very true as far as societies forgetting what happened before, neither making the same mistakes, or not even thinking about things that couldn't have been ignored 20, 30, or 50 years ago. But it's here where we find Wolverine making his way back to the Light's shadow, the territory of the people, which as we're told is an outpost for rangers, ranchers, thieves, and explorers. And really you can just think of this place as like an evolution of what we saw in issue 2, back when Wolverine went to go find Forge, and given that basically the rest of the world had lost power. At the time, Wolverine just made his way towards the Light because they had power when no one else did. So as you could imagine, 20 years later, everything Forge had done up to that point, it's just expanded and grown to benefit way more people, and generations of people at that. But when Wolverine gets here and he walks into the saloon, he comes across some really interesting faces. And I wish there was more time spent here so we can find out who specifically some of these people are, because in some cases it's really obvious, but in other cases it's like I need an explanation on how do we get to this. But nonetheless, when Wolverine gets here, he's treated like a hero. As soon as he walked in the door, they're raising glasses for him, everyone knows his name, which is the kind of place you want to go sometimes, and when he sits down the bartender tells him the drink's on the house. And it's kind of funny how Wolverine responds saying, "You see me reaching for my wallet?" Which lets us know that it's a regular thing, almost like the demon bear drinking a beer. And there's a moment here where we see Wolverine greeted by a couple of kids who knew he was going to be back today. And they ask him if he took care of the bad guys, so he tells them he did, and how it's not something anybody has to worry about anymore. And when he reaches into his bag and hands these kids some badges, some sheriff badges, we also see that Wolverine's wearing a badge himself. And it just goes to show us how Wolverine's adjusted to this world at this stage in his life. But after this, when he steps out on the rooftop to have a conversation with Forge, he jokingly asks him if he's out here enjoying his handiwork, because again, if it wasn't for Forge, these people wouldn't have power. And I do imagine for Forge, there's probably a bit of truth to that, as far as him admiring his handiwork, because the blackout basically gave Forge the opportunity to build something over time for this community and watch it grow. But when Wolverine gets here, he tells Forge the last of the Reavers were holed up in an old military silo. Tough nut to crack, but I did find something special inside. So he reaches in his bag and he pulls out an old bottle of whiskey from 40 years before the blackout. So for a moment here, Forge is like, what are we drinking to? But Logan, he doesn't need an occasion to drink to, because to him it's like, come on man, let's just enjoy this bottle. But Forge tells him here, look at what we've done, old friend. Made a place for ourselves. Saved what we could, saved enough to build a new world. You should be proud. You should be content. Maybe after all these years, it's time to forget the past, let it all go. Bury it, once and for all. Which right there is like the first hint that lets us know that something from Wolverine's past isn't quite done yet. So next, we see him head off to a remote location, 1 week after his conversation with Forge. And it's been 1 year since he was here last. And as he makes his way here, there's a bunch of dead, rotting animals hung up all around this place. And we'll talk about why that's a thing in a little bit. And when he gets here, he has this lamp in his hand that might look a little familiar, like a motorcycle lamp we saw a while back, because Wolverine's come here to see Sabertooth. And man, I'm gonna tell you right now, Sabertooth looked like he's trying to give a whole new definition to the term chopped and screwed. Because if you guys remember back when we covered Wolverine issue 2, it was at that time when Forge built a neutralizer into the headlight of Wolverine's bike, which wasn't really Wolverine's bike. he was just borrowing it, but when this light shined on Sabertooth, it neutralized his healing factor, and that only applied to Sabertooth. So you can just imagine with how crazy and visceral their fights get. This fight by itself left Sabertooth in bad shape. But also at that time, Wolverine told him, "I'll do to you what you did to me for so very long. Tear you apart, little by little. Come back next year, and the year after, and the year after that, and cut another piece off of you." So basically, after all this time, Wolverine is still standing on business. You even have Sabertooth sitting here in the professor's chair, and there's really not much you can do about the situation. But right here, Wolverine says something really interesting, because he's like, "I know that Forge's neutralizer is supposed to be permanent, but at some point, I figured that your healing factor would adapt or something. I guess now we know the thing only has 2 speeds, working or not, but it never hurts to play it safe, does it?" And Sabertooth's more or less like, okay, maybe one day his healing factor will come back and things will go back to how they were. But Wolverine's just like, "You really think I won't put you out of your misery before then?" And it's like, it's crazy to see here that Sabertooth's healing factor is just broken. But also with Wolverine making the threat of just killing Sabertooth and getting it done with, Sabertooth is just like, no, that's not gonna happen. And he can see it in Wolverine's eyes. Because for years, Sabertooth would just pop up on Wolverine, and at least once a year, and do something horrific like kill someone who Logan cares about, which is why he's doing this to Sabertooth now. So because he knows Wolverine's gonna stick to the slow torture, he's more or less just like, alright, let's get on with it. Only for Logan to tell him, not today. And now it is pretty crazy that Wolverine would just come out here and not go through with the torture session, but there's a lot more at play here that we'll talk about in a little bit. But right here, Sabertooth tells him, like, don't go soft on me. You've cut too deep for too long to think this ride just stops. There's no forgiveness on this path we're on. So Wolverine tells him, "You think forgiveness is a thing that will ever exist between us, Creed? I killed the others because they had it coming. Yes, that was revenge, but it was also justice. This is something else entirely." And he tells him here that it's history, which just goes back to the whole eye for an eye thing. So again, Sabertooth is like, "I'm gonna get out of this chair." And Wolverine's like, "Nah, that's not happening." But even with Creed admitting that he gets it, he still goes off for a moment here. And he asks Wolverine what's he waiting for. And he even tells him again to get on with it. And just like Wolverine said before, he tells him here, not today. So as he leaves, Sabertooth tries to hit him with the, "What's wrong with you? Your stomach getting weak? You're not man enough to do the job?" And as Wolverine walks out the door, he just tells Sabertooth that he's not interested. So just after he leaves, we find out that Sabertooth had some company hidden away. And he tells them here, it worked. Normally he can sniff anything out, but the smell of death overpowers his senses. It's too tough to cut through. So the Wolverine didn't know you were here, but now you know what he is and what you're up against. And that's why when Wolverine was making his way here, he saw the dead coyotes and animals just hanging up and rotting, so he can cover the scent of his guests, the Omega Clan, as well as another person who's hanging back in the shadows who we'll see more of later. And these 3 are the genetic seed of the Omega Red that Wolverine killed so many years ago. But even with Sabertooth bringing these guys in to kill Wolverine, to them this is about getting revenge. And with these guys you have another Omega Red, Omega Black, and Omega White. And for them, after coming here and seeing Wolverine, Omega Black is just like, that guy doesn't seem that tough. And Sabertooth is just like, maybe the Omega Clan is made of sterner stuff than Omega Red. But I swear, the last thing you need to be is overconfident. Trust me. But eventually this Omega Red is like, okay, we've seen him. Can we kill him now? And Sabertooth just tells them if they're ready to go down that road. And he goes on to ask, are you? To where then a tall, shadowy figure in the back is just like, yes. And so from here, when we jump over to Wolverine, he sniffed out that he's got some company. Because now the Omega Clan's caught up to him while he was making a stop to let his horse get a drink. And these guys make it clear right off the bat that they've come to make Wolverine pay for the sins of his past. And they waste no time trying to serve judgment. But it's pretty clear to Wolverine right away who these guys are here to get revenge for. So he asks them, who are they supposed to be, the Omega Reds? So that's when Omega Black makes it clear as far as the details of who they are exactly. And I gotta say, Omega Black, he's got a real smug face. He just looks like the type who would talk like, well, I'm Omega Black and he's Omega White. Like, he just seems like a very punchable kind of guy. But nonetheless, when these guys attack, they basically got the same abilities as Omega Red, with the exception of a few extra tricks here and there, but it still doesn't do them any good. Because when Omega White gets a hold of Wolverine, and he tries to fill him with all sorts of diseases and infections, which he does, Wolverine just cuts this dude's hands off, drop kicks him off to the side, and he looks up like, who's next? So seeing this has Omega Black like, okay, he's quicker than I thought. But also at this time, Wolverine notices that they've got these floating cameras, so he asks, what are the cameras for? So Omega Black tells him, That's for our audience, as he goes in to pump 6 different toxins and hundreds of thousands of bacteria into Wolverine. Only for Wolverine to continue the conversation about the camera, because he tells this guy, since they're out here doing this for an audience, is there anyone you want to say goodbye to? And this dude is just looking at Wolverine like, how are you even alive right now? And Omega Black even tells him here, I'm pumping 6 different toxins and hundreds of thousands of bacteria into you right now. Why won't you die? And Wolverine's just like, isn't it obvious? It's because I got such good manners. So I'll die. But you first. As he puts his claw straight through Omega Black's head, which now basically leaves Omega Red as the last man standing, or Omega Red Jr. But it's right here where he goes on to tell Wolverine, when he found us, we thought he was mad. But now I see, he was right. You must be erased from this world. And I am going to do it. Which in a way, this reminds me about what was said earlier as far as society not remembering the past, or in some cases not even knowing the past. Because this Omega clan, these guys were done from the moment they thought they was going to run up on Wolverine and do to him what the original Omega Red couldn't. So now that'll be the last lesson they ever learn. But as it stands, one of these guys are still breathing. Because like we saw earlier, Wolverine didn't kill Omega White, he just disarmed him. And I imagine it's because he intentionally wanted to keep one of these guys alive so he could get some answers. So Wolverine asks him here, what did Omega Red mean when he said, when he found us? Because Logan wants to know who is he. He wants to know who sent these guys. So Wolverine puts the choke on him with his own carbonadium tentacles. It is messed up because the dude has no hands. So it's not like he can stop the choke from getting any tighter. All he can do is just sit there and choke. So Wolverine goes on to tell him, you didn't have to come after me. You chose this. Just know, I can make this last all day. I'm the best there is at what I do. So right there, Omega White just starts singing like a bird. And he's like, Creed, Creed, it was Creed. So after hearing this, Wolverine, he ends this guy's suffering just before he looks into the camera and tells Sabertooth, I know you can hear me, so listen up. I changed my mind. You're not gonna have to wait a year, Creed. I'll be seeing you soon. So right there, Sabertooth is just like I tried to tell him, but they wouldn't listen. And he asked the other visitor, do you see what he is? A force of nature, relentless and inevitable. And Sabertooth even admits that he played his part in making Wolverine who he is today. Because after everything he'd done to Logan in the past, it only made him more vicious. And he also admits that perhaps bringing in the Omega clan was a mistake, because they were just poor copies of the real thing. But then he goes on to tell this last visitor, no, it'll take someone like you, someone who wants, who needs revenge, just as bad as he does. It takes a vengeance that you can't stop thinking about, a taste you can't get out of your mouth. I know you have it in you. I can see it. Hate, burning you up. Honestly, I don't know how you stand it. Him standing there, breathing, living, while your father lies buried in the ground. Because this next dude is the son of Colossus, and he just happens to have a soul sword. So you mean to tell me we got magic and Colossus, a 2-in-1? But in a way, we kinda knew that something like this was coming. Because just before Colossus and Wolverine had their fight to the death, they had a bit of a brief conversation. Well, Wolverine asked, is anyone in the house? And Colossus told him yes. So Wolverine was like, all right, cool. I'll make sure to mark your grave so they know where to find you. But yeah, even back then, it just sounded like whoever was in that house was gonna come back for Wolverine years later. And that's precisely what we're getting. So yeah, I can't wait to see this guy get down. And so now real quick, I wanna give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here, who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/DopeSpill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. All right, later.